I feel like it's safe to say this is the weirdest the Pokemon community has ever been. Tons of people are losing their minds over Game Freak's recent decisions, and it's causing posts like this to be upvoted on a massive scale that we've never seen before on the Pokemon Reddit. Game Freak, Nintendo, and the conflicts most fans don't know about. Almost 10,000 upvotes in just 19 hours. So I was asked to make this its own post, and that's on another post that also got an insane amount of upvotes. More than anything else, I'm happy to see Game Freak finally being unabashedly criticized across the majority of the Pokemon community. Now, I hate to break it to you, but 17,000 of 1.6 million is not a majority. And if we're even going off of the Nintendo video that everyone is just projecting their hate onto, 45,000 dislikes out of 900,000 views is not a majority of the community. You know, this is not the ratio of people that agree or disagree with a video. Negativity is a much stronger emotion. If people are upset with something, they're going to be more likely to actually voice their opinion about being upset about it. So all we know is that 45,000 people out of 900,000 people disagree with the decisions that Game Freak is making, which kind of goes in line with these other posts, 17,000 people going on and leaving crazy long threads and agreeing and just hating on Game Freak for it, but that's less than 5%. It's literally the vocal minority, and the Pokemon community is just in such an echo chamber right now that they don't care about the facts. They don't care about the reality. They only care about throwing down the memes and trying to make themselves, feel heard when they're just wrong, and that's another weird thing. Gotta catch some of them. Well, where was the outrage back in Pokemon Sun and Moon, where the National Dex only existed in the Pokemon Bank, which is the same thing that we have for Pokemon Sword and Shield, and you've never been able to catch all of the Pokemon in any Pokemon game, so that's weird. With the news that only Galar Dex will be available soon from Pokemon Home and Sword and Shield, 37,000 upvotes in just 2 days, which is of the top most in the Pokemon Red. Like, that was just sorted by most all time in just 2 days, and the other ones were memes. If I get 100 upvotes, I'll buy everyone a copy of Sun and Moon. I'll buy everyone Ultra Soul Moon. If I get upvotes, the end of the just weird stupidity things, but then we just go down here, and then it's all about the negativity about Pokemon Sword and Shield. So, let's go and read this post, since apparently it's pretty hot. It's being shared around, and people are trying to oh, this is it. People are forming their own theories. They're trying to figure out why this is happening and what's going on with Game Freak. The fundamental problem with the Pokemon currently is the strained relationship between Nintendo and Game Freak. Pokemon Company is sort of overarching name for Pokemon in general, shared by Nintendo, Game Freak, and Creatures. Yeah, that's kind of how it goes. Creatures is a part of Pokemon, Nintendo and Game Freak, they have a share, and that's just kind of like how Pokemon works. Okay, so I ask that you please bear with me for the next couple minutes, because it's about to get really finance heavy, so I know that can be a snooze. We're talking about money, investors, earnings, and stuff like that. It does get kind of weird, but the point is to prove that this guy is full of crap and has no idea what he's talking about. And that's the sad thing, this video isn't going to get shared on Twitter and Facebook groups and posted on Reddit and getting thousands and thousands of upvotes, because people don't like the facts. They just want to have their side explained, even though it's complete nonsense. This guy has no idea what he's talking about, but people are like, oh, it makes sense, Nintendo's kind of the bad guy and Game Freak is falling apart, so that's what I want to hear right now, and that's all that matters. So, you know what, guys? Deep breath. Just focus for the next couple minutes. Let's do this. In short, Pokemon makes a ton of money, but Pokemon games make less than you think. From 2013 to 2015, the Pokemon Company pulled in about 16 million selling games like Pokemon Black and White 2 and X and Y. Now, any astute Pokemon fan already knows that this is weird, because 2013-2015 was X and Y and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and not a lot of sales happened during 2013 for Pokemon Black and White 2, especially because Pokemon X and Y was announced at the beginning of the year, and Pokemon Black and White 2 had an October release. So a large majority of those sales were already done by 2012, which have nothing to do with the 2013 earnings report, and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire is missing from here, because it hurts his narrative. And he's a big Gen whiner. That's why I call the really weird Generation 5 fans that overly praise Generation 5 and call everything after that bad. He does that throughout the rest of this. He pretty much blames X and Y and on Game Freak, and then says Black and White 2 was the last time it was good. So already trying to sneak in some extra narratives here when it doesn't even make sense. And also 16 million units of Pokemon X and Y were sold in this time frame, and that was at $40 a unit. Now, that is the retail price, but the margins on that are 75-80% still going to the Pokemon Company, so this 16 million number seems very off, and I think I know where he got it from. This right here, Pokemon Company's net profit jumps 26 times to 143 million last year. So we have the 15th fiscal year, which is the year that ends February 28th, 2013, because fiscal years versus calendar years are just a little off. But if he's using this 16 million number, this is for 2012, effectively, with Pokemon Black and White 2 and everything else going on before then. And then this would be Pokemon X and Y, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and then the year without a Pokemon game, and then 2016, and that's where the numbers get massive because of Pokemon Go, but also Sun and Moon still having a really good showing, and you can see he's already playing with the numbers. 16.6 million gets rounded down to 16 million, 143.3 gets rounded up to 144. Okay, quick little side note, but I'm editing the video and I feel like this is something that needs to be said because it's a massive problem with society and like online social media culture in general these days, and that's that people value popular opinion more than fact. That's one of my biggest things. That's why I call out the idiocy so much these days, because that's just not how reality works, but that's exactly what's going on right here. That people, they want him to be right. They agree with him because this is what they think makes sense. But as I show in this video, it's just complete nonsense. This guy has no idea what he's talking about. He has no credibility, but he started getting upvoted from just people wanting him to be right. He started getting shared. People started thinking that this actually means something, that this is exactly what's going on. And the more likes it gets, the more correct it must be, but that's not how it is. This guy hasn't established any credibility. He hasn't shown any sources or suggested anything that makes him right or correct about what's going on, but now it's been massively pushed because it just goes with what the vocal minority and all this outrage is trying to push for their agenda. I just want to make that clear, so let's get back to this breakdown. So yeah, when Pokemon Go came out, they made 144 million, almost 26 years worth of profit. This is also very disingenuous because he's counting the entire time of Gamefreak, which didn't have Pokemon for its first couple of years, and then Pokemon also, you know, having a slow start, being Japan only for a while, and then becoming the the worldwide, insane international cultural success that it has been. Video game sales have made up only 19% of Pokemon's absurd total gross since 1996. Everything else goes through the Pokemon Company, gets split 3 ways as best we know. And the thing is that it actually is backed up by the numbers that we know about Pokemon, that Pokemon is the largest grossing franchise, but this includes all media, and even then the games are still pretty strong. So we have like 17 billion revenue from all the games, but this also includes, like I said, the Creatures games, the third parties, the spin-offs, and then the main series games still being a part of most of that with their estimated average retail price. So we have a breakdown like here, you know, 200 million units, average $40 price, 8 billion, so on, so forth, and then comparing the revenue breakdown out of the 90 billion that Pokemon has made. But if we look at mobile games, only 3.36. So Pokemon Go is 3.36 billion of Pokemon's 90 billion. It's mostly merchandise, card games, and, you know, just everything else that Pokemon is. Also, licensing out probably makes them absurd amounts of money. So let's keep breaking this down. Nintendo owns 32% of voting rights in the Pokemon Company, which also starts to hurt this guy's narrative, because the more we get into it, you know, this means Game Freak has huge pressure to keep making games to fit the systems. I don't know how Nintendo can exert huge pressure over Game Freak when they just have 30% of voting rights. And then the other is split between Creatures, which is a part of Pokemon, and then we also have Game Freak. So this is already kind of weird, but what I want to do is I want to take this step further. I want to see the numbers. And another thing is, if we're talking about 2013 through 2015, that includes these years. So it's not just this 1 year for 3 years, it's all of this, which shows a much larger number than the guy is trying to push. And then what I want to do was find the source from the official government gazette. So remember, this is going to be like the 2012 year, or ending, you know, 2013 February, and this is what we're going to be looking for Pokemon X and Y, the 6th generation, 3DS era, stuff like that. So I pulled that into a translator because I couldn't, you know, this isn't text, this is just an image, and this kind of shows us at least what we need to know. So the weird thing, and this is where it gets really financy, is that we're talking about millions of yen. So 2,979 million yen, bringing us to 3 billion. And then we just have to kind of look at what these things are. So remaining profits. So that means there was a profit of 7.7 billion yen for Pokemon. So that's 70 million profit right there for just one of the 3 years mentioned. much higher than the 16 million for 3 years total. And this isn't gross, because if we're talking about gross, then the numbers are also really insane, and a lot of that also gets put back into development, because what's happening is Pokemon is on like a 3-year development cycle. They're 3 years behind, if not a touch longer, when it comes to that. So we could see some drops here maybe because they're actually working on future 3D titles, which are going to take more resources than near the end of a generation where everything is kind of already taken care of. So yeah, Pokemon X and Y development was already happening, or was already like finished when it came to this number, so they don't have to worry about it as much. Pokemon Sun and Moon development is starting here, so that's where a lot of that money is going towards, making the numbers look smaller. And with Nintendo getting a cut, they're going to be getting a cut from the bigger number, not the smaller number. So it's not like Nintendo is getting a third of that 16 million, or they're taking that 16 million or something. There's still a lot, tens of millions floating around into Nintendo, and then also depending on like the owner's capital as well. And then we also don't know like the inner breakdown between the shareholders, how much goes into paying the employees, how much goes into paying the company, investments, and then research and development and future stuff like that. So the numbers are already off, and let's see what he tries to push with this. Nintendo stands to make money on Pokemon in 4 ways: merchandise, game sales, console sales, and additional game sales via new console. You'll probably pick up a Nintendo game if you buy a Switch for Pokemon, which is true, which is also why the 2DS was so pushed. Gamefreak stands to make money in Pokemon 2 ways: merchandise and game sales. But as we can see, merchandise or non-game sales is still going to be 80% of that, so that's also what Nintendo is focusing on as well. Nintendo mostly want Pokemon to sell merch and sell consoles, which is why they've always been a new Pokemon game to launch alongside new handhelds. Except there hasn't been. What do you mean there's always been a new Pokemon game? 3DS was out for years before Pokemon X and Y came out. The Nintendo Switch was out for years before Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, or at least this upcoming one, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. So the quality of the games themselves don't really matter too much to them. Except that's wrong. I haven't seen any quality decline in X and Y, Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire. Sun and Moon still had a ton of features and made a good push to enhance on the 3DS. And then Pokemon Sword and Shield looks to be the greatest, most ambitious project that Game Freak has ever made. And Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee are the second best Pokemon games. You can have something that looks simpler, might have taken less work, but still be a fantastic product. Why are you hating on that? You know, that doesn't mean they were lazy or cutting quality or something. They just made something good. That's the end result. Game Freak makes the games. They're a much smaller studio than the size of Pokemon would suggest, which is actually true. You know, I was surprised to find out that's only 143 for staff of Game Freak as of April 2018. So while they were working on Pokemon Sword and Shield, while finishing Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, while also kind of just finishing Pokemon Ultra Sun Ultra Moon, only 143 people working at Game Freak. Now, here's the thing about game development. They hire a lot of temporary staff, they outsource a lot of work, and then the Pokemon Company International also handles a lot of like the translations and stuff like that. So the core development being at 143, still pretty solid for Game Freak. Now, we do know from a recent interview that Game Freak has been cut in half, and there's one team working on Pokemon, other team working on Game Freak projects. I mean, still, the numbers makes sense. And then if they need extra people, they hire them in and stuff like that, because that's just how game development works. So again, still seeing shaky on how he's trying to break this down. Nintendo and Pokemon Company can't force Game Freak to get bigger. Okay, yeah, that sounds right, but why would they want to? You know, you have a core strong team that's making the best that they can because they're the most experienced and they're the most understanding Pokemon. Nintendo and the Pokemon Company can't force Game Freak to get bigger, and they don't have any technical say in what to develop, just control over whether or not it gets to be called Pokemon. That's because this like crazy thing it is, like the Pokemon Company is Nintendo, Creatures, and Game Freak. I think that's one thing that we need to keep reminding ourselves about through all of this like mumbo jumbo stuff going on. Nintendo have huge sway over Game Freak due to their sheer size and sole ownership of the trademark, but they don't have the rights to it. You know, it's equal rights sharing. Even though Nintendo does own the trademark for Pokemon, it is still split between Creatures, Game Freak, and Nintendo to form the Pokemon Company. If no more Pokemon games or merch were made during that illegal battle, Nintendo would be fine and Game Freak would not. Except I think the legality behind it is a lot more complicated than that, because there would still be Creatures probably being able to support the Pokemon TCG. It's not like if there's a legal battle, everything about Pokemon just stops, because that's in no one's interest. I think that's where like the rights and things kind of come into play, and then Pokemon stuff happens. But I was able to find a fairly recent interview. This was 2017. So, simplest terms, Nintendo, Game Freak, Creatures each have 1/3 ownership over the brand. It's a little bit more complicated than that in certain scenarios. For example, The producing role that creatures originally held went to the Pokemon Company, and a percentage of the rights went with that, so there are certain complications. It depends on the project, but there is no situation where Nintendo and the Pokemon Company will put pressure on Game Freak or something like that. So coming from Junichi Masuda, it paints a very different picture than the nonsense this guy is trying to push with his agenda to fit to the pandering of the outrage right now. And it's not like Junichi Masuda has any reason to lie, because he goes into detail about how all of this stuff works from a corporate perspective. So it's not in anyone's interest to lie in this situation. This means Game Freak has huge pressure to keep on making the game fit the new systems. Except we've seen, but it's not pressure. They want to also update and keep with the times. No one is developing for the Nintendo DS anymore because there's just nothing in it for anyone. Can't really help to sell. Can't really help sell the 3DS if your game is 2D. Being pushed off the 2D ledge into 3D was a huge mistake for Game Freak, since they now had to stop all game design and throw bodies at making 721 high-resolution 3D models. And that's just the Pokemon. Except this is wrong, because the Pokédex 3D Pro is what has been using the resources from Pokemon XY, Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, all the way to Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon. I think even Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee is just like kind of taking the models and making them slightly more refined, but it's Pokemon Sword and Shield that's remaking the models, or at least enhancing them on a much larger scale. So it's not like X and Y was rushed and had all this high pressure to redo all these sprites and models and stuff. No, the models have been designed for a long time to kind of work with the app on the 3D Pro and then have a foundation for the future Pokemon, again, going into the research and development. They weren't forced. They had years to work on all of this stuff. Those models could have been like starting to be made 4 years before Pokemon X and Y ended up coming out. It's clear, looking through X and Y, that they were bumping up against technology more than their own incompetence. No, that's not clear. The facts say no. Now here's where we get into the Generation 5 nonsense. Black and White 2 had huge, sprawling routes, completely new environments, and cool, complicated dungeons. X and Y put Mewtwo in a hallway. Are you just going to ignore that in Pokemon Black and White 2, Virizion was just slapped into an already existing route that was effectively a hallway? You know, you can cherry pick and try to skew all you want, but it doesn't change the facts. You know, we're encountering Zygarde is what I would call a cool, complicated dungeon. A lot of the other things going on with Pokemon X and Y are also really fantastic, considering that they had to make it in 3D, and you could really feel the environment in Pokemon more so than in Pokemon Black and White 2. Remember having to like ride a Pokemon through snow? I would call that fancy, like a completely new environment. There were also some huge sprawling routes. The forest north of Lumio City. Also, if you go to the east of Lumio City, like that really fall autumny kind of place, there were some pretty awesome sprawling. Wait, what about? Oh man, I don't remember like all the names and the routes, but the one just south of the cave where Zygarde is, where you have like the bridge and like all the water and crazy stuff, there were some huge sprawling routes in Pokemon X and Y. Also, are we forgetting that in Heart Gold Soul Silver, the best Pokemon games that are just loved by everyone for bringing so much expression into Pokemon, for Kyogre, they just slapped him in a cave, you know, in a hallway. Game was clearly rushed. Was it though? No. I didn't play Pokemon X and Y and feel, wow, this game was rushed. There was a lot going on in those games. And if anything, Pokemon Black and White 2 just felt underwhelming as much as Pokemon Black and White. Well, I can't say definitively, stuff like Mega Evolution has been a huge hit for merchandising. And there's been guesses that it was suggested down from high up. So Mega Evolution only exists because of Nintendo for merchandise, because they knew it would be a success and they knew it would sell money, even though Mega Evolution is kind of like some of the least merchandised stuff when you think about it. I don't know anyone that owns like a Mega Charizard plush or anything like that, but when it comes to all the other main Pokemon, just tons of plushes for those. I'd imagine that Mimikyu alone has made more money in merchandise than all of the Mega merchandise put together. Both Black and White and X and Y didn't have any marketable Pokemon, which is why Greninja got trotted out so often, and you can see why Nintendo might push for a guaranteed hit. Was it though? Mega Evolution or Mega Charizard alone has probably made Pokemon Company 10 million. Are you talking about Pokemon Company making 10 million of that 144 million or that 116 million? Because now your numbers aren't even making any sense, because you're just trying to push like, oh, one Mega making all this money. I don't think I've seen a Mega Charizard plush commercially available. You probably like order it online or something, but even the Pokemon Center probably didn't have a long run of those Mega Pokemon. So this is garbage as well. Not to mention that every 10 years, Game Freak is asked to remake games they've already made. Are they asked, or do they want to do it? Fire Red and Leaf Green were remakes in order to have Kanto compatible with Gen 3 hard lock on transferring Pokemon. But was that 100% Nintendo making it happen? Because Heart Gold, Soul Silver were amazing games, and I feel like it was like a nice way of revisiting while also kind of padding out the game lineup. You know, would you call Emerald Rush because of Leaf Green, or Ruby and Sapphire Rush because of Leaf Green and stuff having to make these remakes? It wasn't happening back then, so why is it now only a problem? While you can tell that Gamefreak enjoyed making Gold and Silver based on how much love is put into that game, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire show what happened when game studios already feeling pushed to the brink and asked to skip their third version of poorly received games to remake ones they've already made. This guy, he's a gen whiner. After Black and White, that's when it all went bad because Pokemon Black and White 2 are perfection. Pokemon X and Y were not poorly received. The way I recall it, being a Pokemon fan since effectively year one, the original Red and Blue games, Pokemon Black and White were poorly received games. This is when the established Pokemon fan base went in and mostly hated it. What happened was all my friends fell out during the 5th generation, and then they all came back in 6th generation because they loved it. And Gen 6 lasted a lot longer than any of the other recent Pokemon games. People were playing that game for almost a year very actively because it was like the Renaissance. It brought people back, and it was very well loved. So, I mean, I guess you can, say that. And then skip their third version. They didn't skip it. I guess if you read interviews and you actually pay attention to the information out there, Game Freak said that they didn't want to be predictable. They didn't want to make a Z version because everyone would expect that, so they wanted to make Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire the Z version plus. They took the remakes that were coming up anyways, and they decided to expand on that. That's why they kept the Mega Evolution thing going. That's why they kind of made the story have some parallels, because they didn't want to do it. They didn't skip it to rush a game. They wanted to have more passion in this game. And also, again, you're missing Heart Gold, Soul Silver because they're forced. Wait, every 10 years they're asked to remake games. I don't think this guy thinks that Heart Gold, Soul Silver exists. Because isn't every 5 years we get a remake or something? And it doesn't seem like they were rushed and pushed to the brink on that one. That was just as much of a love passion project as any Pokemon game. Zero Battle Frontier, remove all of Emerald's improvements, more Megas, etc. The Battle Frontier is because less than 10% of the player base actually appreciated the Battle Frontier and Emerald version, so it's just a waste to put it in there, especially in these changing times where people aren't going to work as hard for their things. Battle Frontier was in Heart Gold, Soul Silver. I only played the Battle Tower. I didn't care about the other battle facilities. I just want to get the fastest BP so I could get competitive. That's what a lot of people do. Removed all of Emerald's improvements, but added improvements of its own. More Megas. Yeah, because everyone wanted more Megas. Not said aloud, but there's been more and more tension between Game Freak and Nintendo. With Pokemon Go's popularity, Nintendo can see a profitable future. I mean, this is August 2017, so late 2017 interview. I feel like there would be something to bring out from that, or we would actually see cracks, but no. So Nintendo can see a profitable future without being beholden to Game Freak's artistic decisions. Except Junichi Masuda and Game Freak worked closely with Niantic for Pokemon Go. That's not like Nintendo can take their third of the Pokemon license and then give it to other people for making spin-off games or making mobile games and stuff like that. So that's not how it works. And then going into that complicated stuff about spin-off games, creatures, and then other developers and stuff, it's published by Nintendo. It's not that Nintendo is owning it that hard. Launching tons of Pokemon apps, Masters, Quest, Pokemon Sleep, or maybe it's just because instead of here's the thing. Here's the thought experiment, guys. Where is Mystery Dungeon for Generation 7? Instead of getting 3DS spin-off titles, we've been getting smartphone spin-off titles like Pokemon Quest. Everyone has a smartphone. The way that it is right now is that your smartphone is the new Game Boy, so why not put Pokemon on that and then have people love and appreciate Pokemon at all times? That they can either play on their main console or while they have downtime with their smartphone in their hand, because 80% of my viewers watch on smartphones, so why not have connectivity to other Pokemon games while you've already had a successful game that they didn't even plan on being successful? They thought that the launch of Pokemon Go was going to be about 10% of what it ended up becoming, which is why the servers were slammed and Niantic had to ruin their game to fix their game with the whole footstep thing and the servers crashing and whatnot. So looking at everything else that happened, that's just not correct, And then Pokemon Home makes a lot of sense to make the Pokemon Home app on your smartphone, that we could have that connectivity to your Switch to make all of your Pokemon work together. Game Freak feels like they're being pushed out by making the largest project they ever had with Pokemon Sword and Shield sound, and hoping they can launch another franchise that Nintendo doesn't have stake in. Or maybe after over 20 years of making the same thing, they want to be a game development company, like with Town. Since Black White 2, they developed 4 games without Nintendo, stretching their already short staff thin. Are we going to talk about their smaller staff working on other games as well? Before Black and White 2? So Black and White 2, just the holy, final, amazing bright spark that Game Freak ever had. They famously ask, what non-Pokemon game would you make that would sell well to new applicants? That's just a good application question. This guy clearly doesn't understand business because you ask those abstract questions. It's not like they're waiting for a game pitch. You don't have to pitch a game to work for Game Freak and then they steal your idea and make it. They want to see if you're a creative person. They want to see if you have other ideas that can improve Pokemon and just be a well-rounded game developer overall instead of only specializing in monster creation and stuff like that. They can't try to hold Pokemon hostage by not making games anymore since Nintendo can make tons of money without them. So stupid. Have you guys seen the trailer for their new game Town? Which game does it look like they're more excited about making? I mean, we have nothing on Town right now, so you really can't tell. And Town just kind of seems like a standard RPG, whereas with Pokemon Sword and Shield, they're changing the formula and making the greatest Pokemon experience they've made. So I'd say they're more excited about Pokemon Sword and Shield. Most of this was explained to me by someone working at TPCI. When I worked with them, most of his stuff you can look up yourself. Well, I looked this stuff up myself, and it says you're full of crap. Weird. And then to wrap up this video, knowing that, the question is, will Nintendo Pokemon Company do anything about our uproar and help Game Freak? Game Freak doesn't need help. I think all of their decisions have been great in recent years. You look at their introduction, when they did the Pokemon Direct for Pokemon Sun and Moon, and they made the It All Comes Together trailer. That is Pokemon beautifully represented and refined. The representation for Pokemon is incredibly strong. Generation 7 has the best generation of new Pokemon introduced because they get Pokemon. Game Freak gets Pokemon. Pokemon understands Pokemon right now. Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, second best Pokemon games because it's about the Pokemon adventure. It really makes it feel like you're playing Pokemon as a real experience, which is what Pokemon is about. So this is just a person with something that doesn't even matter. Like, I completely disagree with him. Some person, I disagree with him. He's a person, we cancel each other out. So that means Game Freak doesn't need help. Game Freak is doing just fine, and everything is going well. It's stupid. It's so stupid, guys. So if you guys enjoy the video, hope you have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.